11 things you should never buy cheap.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I'm really excited about... You know what? I'm not going to say that because I say that every time and I get called out for it.
Guess what, guys? He's excited.
This is going to be a fun show because... because of where it originated from, right? So a lot of the show ideas, some come from our audience, some come from clients. This one hit us out of left field. We're not expecting it, and it kind of just hit us right in the face when it fell in our lap.
So we were in a content meeting, and full-time equivalent Daniel was just sharing. By the way, we'll change names and other things to protect those that are guilty or innocent. But Daniel was sharing with us friend, family, that was explaining that when they got their tattoo, somehow we were talking about tattoos, that they actually walked into the tattoo parlor, asked the artist where their list or their art that was on the cheapest tier, so they could get the best, cheapest tattoo that the artist created. So they walked in and said,
"Hey, sir, I'd like, or ma'am, I'd like for you to put something permanent on my body. It'll be there forever, never going to go away. But I'd like to spend the lowest amount possible to make that happen." That was how they went about making this decision.
Probably not the way you want to go about making that decision. And that kind of leads to the theme of today's show, is that we wanted to kind of talk about tattoos. Now, Bo, we before I do the setup, because there were some things we were going to show on the tattoos. Why is it that you don't want to be so cheap with tattoos?
Yeah, because if you are someone out there and you decide to go bargain hunting for tattoos, perhaps you might end up with Pika-oo, which is over here on that arm, or you might end up with a fantastic quote like, "Believe in yourself and never lose hoop."
So this is the point, is that yes, something's cheap, because I get it. A lot of you guys, you're financial mutants. You want to be, and maybe you're aspiring to become a financial mutant, but we want to share, you have to pay attention to value. What do you get out of the transaction, not just how much you save out of it, because there might be some contrarian other ways to look at it. I mean, look, I've read The Millionaire Next Door. Mm-hmm. I've read Stop Acting Rich. And some of the data that comes out is contrarian to what you think.
Sure.
And now a lot of people think, okay, you get on this structure is I'm going to save every dollar. I'm going to squeeze every bit so my army of dollar bills can do it. And then that's very noble. That's good. The problem is where you're cutting corners in areas that actually it would behoove you or benefit you to actually spend the extra money, like shoes.
Yep.
Think about that. Shoes, one of the things when you read books like Stop Acting Rich or Millionaire Next Door, they do share that a lot of successful people will actually wear nice shoes.
They'll spend more on shoes.
And the reason is because, in the quote, Dr. Stanley even has a quote, cheap shoes wear you don't wear them. Since you're walking on your feet or you're standing for hours, you actually, if you wear cheap shoes, it causes back problems, yep. your ankles, your flat. If you're flat-footed, you need help with that. I mean, shoes are actually something you shouldn't neglect. So cutting a corner on costs with your shoes probably isn't the best way to save bucks.
And I would even say that it's not the best thing. I mean, frugality is a great quality. However, for something like shoes, buying the cheap shoes may, in the long term, actually cost you more money. And that's going to be kind of one of the things we walk through is just because I cheap out today on this thing doesn't mean that I'm saving money over the long term. Shoes are a great example. Yeah, I might spend a little bit more, but if they last me longer and I don't have medical problems, probably going to be better off financially in the long term.
So let's jump into things you should never buy for cheap. And the first thing, we kind of group these. We put this in a section where we put something that we just to kind of make you think, go, and then, but then we went a little deeper with it. And the first category, though, is long-lasting effects.
Yeah, I felt like, letting tattoos be the segue in here was a pretty good one because obviously a tattoo is a long-lasting thing. It's probably going to be there for a while. So let's talk about some other long-lasting decisions where perhaps you shouldn't make the cheapest choice.
So just like shoes obviously have an impact on the way your back feels, the way your ankles and so forth. Mattresses are the same way. And here's something I think is interesting. I did a little Google research. Mm-hmm. Some of the studies out there show that we spend 25 years of our life actually sleeping.
That makes sense. If you think about if you're supposed to sleep 8 hours a day, that's what, a third of the day.
Yeah.
So if you live for 75 years, then 25 of those years were lived on a mattress.
So that leads to, because I had Daniel, I said, FTE, go find me some article, so find something, because I've always see ads, or you'll be riding down the street and there'll be a sign on the front lawn, they'll say, mattresses from $29 or something like that. And you're like, wow, that's a cheap mattress. So Daniel found some ads. Here's one that I couldn't believe. I don't know if this is genius or the worst fundraising idea I've ever heard. Is there's actually a band, and I don't know where this is, but you can see on the right, we found this on the internet. Their big annual fundraiser is actually to sell mattresses.
So, when I was in school, and I was never in the band, but I remember they used to sell like the world's best chocolate bars. At my school, they weren't selling, $199 mattresses.
So I'm just telling you, do a little research. There's lots of, you can go to Consumer Reports. There's lots of stuff out there on YouTube. Do your research because you're going to spend a lot of time on a mattress. Probably not the best place to cut a corner. But let's talk about something that actually has a little bigger impact than even the mattress you sleep on. Let's talk about medical procedures.
Yeah, once again, this is one that can have long-lasting effects. And what I think is so interesting about medical procedures is you can break them down into like necessary medical procedures, things you have to have done to increase the utility of your day-to-day life, or there are even cosmetic medical procedures. And even when you're talking about those, you probably don't want to go with the cheapest solution.
Well, and I think this leads into, because a lot of you guys, we've already talked about it. This is a mindset that you want to be good with your money, but you're trying to make sure that you don't do this in a poor way. So how can you tell, am I making a good decision or a bad decision? Well, I have an opportunity cost analysis, Bo, and we talked about this. This is something that I think will serve you very well. If you get nothing else out of today's show, pay attention to this opportunity cost analysis, because this will give you the clarity for decision making on things you need to cut the corner on versus things you ought to invest for the long term. And the first thing I'll talk about is like LASIK surgery.
Oh, that's a great one.
So I've had LASIK. I had LASIK done in the mid-2000s. Still great.
And you said it was life-changing, right?
It was life-changing.
An unbelievable
it was
thing.
Truly incredible. And I went to the same doctor that did a lot of the Atlanta Braves, because I lived in Atlanta at the time. So a lot of you guys who have heard the story of Greg Maddux and his thing with LASIK, I went to the exact same surgeon that did Greg Maddox's. And a lot of you guys are like, wow. So that obviously means you were willing to pay more than what I see advertised in the paper for $500 an eye.
Or buy one, get one free.
So here's the opportunity cost that I did with my own eyes, is that I looked at the good. If I go to this $500 an eye LASIK center, what am I saving? And it was, the good is I was saving between $500 to $2,000 for going to this cheap advertised LASIK center.
And look, we all know, because we subscribe to 88 Times Over here, if you were to save that $500 to $2,000 and you were to invest that and let it compound into retirement, that could be big bucks. So that could be a very, very good thing.
The bad was I'm blind. So when you compare $500 of savings to blind, you quickly see the clarity that, hey, this is probably not the greatest place to trim a few bucks. It's the same thing with cosmetic procedures. It's the same thing with orthopedics. Like if you're getting joint replacement, do your research, because this has a long-lasting impact.
And just a note, not all medical providers are created equal. So if you are going to do something, I'm thinking about a dear friend of mine, if you're going to do something like a knee replacement or like a hip replacement, it is worth doing your research. It's worth getting someone who you're not the very first person they've done this procedure on, and they have a track record of doing it well, because a lot of that stuff, you can't get the water back up the hill.
That's exactly right. So that leads to, I want to talk about, now, look, this is a little self-deprecating, but I think that's good. There's always a good educational component when you can make fun of yourself. So we titled this Growing Up Preston.
Now, this is one of those. If you're out there in iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, one of those places, you ought to go pull up YouTube real quick, go to this point in the show, because right now it is Brian Preston circa 1977,
Well,
maybe?
one's my kindergarten photo, and then the
Right.
other one's the greatest.
Maybe
you can see.
1979?
So this is definitely in the 70s. And here's what's interesting. We just had a YouTube comment, call us trust fund babies.
Nope.
And I'm like, it
Nope.
cracks me up when people just assume they see a level of success and they assume, well, these guys were just born. If you go look at our yearbook photos and our kindergarten photos, you can see, getting dressed, getting to school. That was just, it was happening, but humble beginnings. But it is interesting when you think about, I think about all the things and the lessons I learned growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big ones was on things you don't want to be cheap about. And I learned these through life and experience. And I'm going to pick on my mom a little bit. And everybody knows I love my mother, but she's good at saving some bucks.
That she was tight. Frugality was a superpower of hers. No doubt.
Grew up in a household where every dollar had a purpose, including laundry detergent. And my mother, and also soap. I've told this story so laundry detergent in our household was bought at Pace, a membership. This is before Costco. This is before Sam's Club. We had Pace that we drive to, and I kid you not, our laundry detergent would come in these big 5-gallon containers that you'd scoop this dry powder.
It's granulated powder. It's not like the liquid stuff. It's like granulated, hard, coarse powder. Because, by the way, I had the same laundry detergent growing up.
It must have been cheap because you could turn your reds into pinks, you could turn your blues into purples just in a matter of about 3 washes.
If it was blue jeans or what, you were going to thin out your clothes. Whatever clothes you had were going to come out 1 degree thinner after you washed them.
So it wasn't until I got older that I realized that the value proposition was probably not that good. It was actually when I got married that my wife was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is the detergent that you grew up with. You can actually preserve the color of your clothing, because I just wouldn't wash clothes.
Yeah,
you just wear undershirts. You just do other things to preserve the color.
A few times.
That's not probably the cleanest thing to do. And but that leads to the soap. My mom was doing Etsy before Etsy existed or even was cool. Is that we would take our little soap slivers, and my mom would melt them down, and then we would put them in these big ice trays and make recycled soap.
That's disgusting. I just want to make sure that I understand. So bar soap was something that was used in the Preston household, and when it would get down to where it was the little sliver, the little flakes,
you'd recycle it.
Rather than discarding that and going to grab the new box of Dove to put in the shower, she would take them and she would combine all the soaps from all the different bathrooms and melt them down and have a new Did she at least have like molds where it was like...
No, it was an ice tray.
It was an ice tray.
It was an ice tray that you would divide in, so to make big chunky bars.
That is disgusting.
So it's but what's funny though is that this actually led to, I had Daniel go pull, because we did a little research, because like I said, Etsy, this is a thing where you can create your own fancy soap, put lavender and oil of essence or whatever those essence of oil. What's the fancy
essential
oil?
oils?
Essential oils, yeah, whatever the fancy oils that I'm sure my wife buys. But it's
essence of oil.
But you put that stuff in the soaps. Well, this is a thing, by the way. There's actually a charity out there that takes hotel soap and turns it into, and they have a way of cleaning it so people like Bo aren't grossed out. But I thought that was worth a picture to put it up there. But it is one of those things where, and it's not just because I give my parents a lot of credit. They did know every dollar was super important, but they were growing up, Preston had one thing that I do pick on my parents is the opportunity cost, is that they never, ever, ever would ask somebody to help them financially, meaning like hire a financial advisor or other things, because they didn't want to spend the money.
Yep.
So they were being cheap, and I think the wrong way on this next category.
And, I think this is one, I think a lot of people struggle with this because they think about, all right, I want to build to financial independence. I want to build to a certain level of wealth and success. But anything, if I don't have every dollar moving towards that goal, or perhaps I do something that shifts some of those dollars away, I'm going to prohibit myself from actually getting there. And I imagine that's what your parents thought. Well, no, if I incur a new expense trying to build my army of dollar bills, well, that's not going to be good.
Right.
So no way could that be a positive.
So, but that's why I had Daniel. I said, Daniel, I want to actually put some numbers to this. I want to put some meat to it. So let's do another tale of two savers. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's interesting. When you get older, I got married and met my wife's family, who were also, didn't make a ton of money, but have done really good things with their money by the fact that they actually put their army of dollars to work. So I told Daniel, I said, I want you to do, because my parents' idea of investing was CDs.
Sure.
That's what I grew up with. My dad used to tell me this cautionary tale of the only time he did equities was when this son of a gun stockbroker cold called him, convinced him to buy 2 stocks, and then he lost his money on them. So he was just never, ever going into this crazy gambling type thing of stocks. So CDs were, in his mind, perceived as super safe.
Sure.
So that's what we always did. Meanwhile, my in-laws, you know, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law were buying the Fidelity Magellan Fund back when it was the thing to do. I mean, this is Peter Lynch, who, you know, set up some incredible opportunities in the long term for his investors. And I got to tell you guys, this one decision, and you face this same decision yourself, this one decision can change your life. So make sure your army of dollar bills is working, but walk them through the illustration.
So what we said is if we just take the time period from 1985 through 2000, because that's kind of the time when your parents were doing the CDs and then your in-laws were in the Fidelity Magellan Fund, what does it actually look like if you grow your investments through there? Well, if they both started with $50,000 in 1985, didn't add anything else to it, just both started with $50,000, you can see that by the year 2000, your in-laws would have had almost $836,000. But your parents, who were doing the perceived safe thing, the steady as it goes investing, that $50,000 using 1-year CDs would have been about $118,000. So it would have grown, it would have doubled, it would have done well, but not nearly what using that investment mutual fund would have done for them.
Well, I mean, and I think the results are in the fact that, and by the way, if you're wondering how did we choose this time period, I met my wife in the mid 90s. We got married in 98, just had my 22nd wedding anniversary this weekend.
Happy anniversary.
So the 2000 seemed like a good shutoff because that's where, you know, my in-laws came into my life was in the late 90s. And I saw my father-in-law actually retire at age 55. I mean, how many people actually get, back then, this is, like I said, in the late 90s, early 2000s, actually retire at 55. That's incredible, and this is what kind of shows that one decision of buying into the Fidelity Magellan Fund got him closer to 7 figures versus my parents. You know, they doubled their money, but yes, the army of dollar bills didn't get to turned into the peak maximum opportunity of what they could have been.
And so what I hear is, you know, it makes me so sad to know that your father had this very poor experience with a financial advisor. A guy cold called him and told him to buy some stocks.
That's not a financial advisor. That's a stockbroker just focusing on selling a product.
So, but I think had your parents had some appropriate education around how to make sound financial decisions, and they would have had a true financial advisor, perhaps they would have been in the same situation as your in-laws with a little bit of education and a little bit of product. So one of the things that we want you guys to have access to is our 8 questions to ask a financial advisor. If you're someone who's thinking about hiring a financial advisor or starting to look into it, or perhaps you're already working with one, you can go out to our website, moneyguide.com/ I got corrected for the backslashes. moneyguide.com/resources, and you can go download this. It just walks through 8 great questions you can ask to know what type of financial advisor you're working with to make sure you're making a wise decision.
Yeah, go maximize that money so your money can actually do something for you, because I think that's the thing that I realized, and that's what made me, I mean, I'm telling you, when I read The Millionaire Next Door, when I read The Wealthy Barber, the light bulb went off and I said, look, I can do this. You too can learn how to make your money work just as hard for you. So don't let this opportunity pass you by.
Love it.
So let's transition. I want to talk about things that you can do that are penny wise, pound foolish.
Now, my favorite thing when we do these shows, I think, is when we get to pick on you. So not only was there a segment called Growing Up Preston, where we wouldn't really pick on you, but we just kind of got to relive your childhood. This first one is not Growing Up Preston. This is Adult Preston.
Yeah.
This is Brian Preston, present day, and we want you guys to learn from his mistakes.
Now look, I'm the first to admit, I'm a weirdo who has learned how to turn all my quirks to where they're profitable somehow. You guys actually show up to find out about my quirkiness. And one of the things is that I like leftovers. You know, I know leftovers gross a lot of people out, but I look at it as a value spreader, meaning that if you go eat a meal And that meal comes, especially, like, think about Italian food.
Oh, it's always way bigger than you should
Italian
eat
food. They've even, by the way, businesses have caught on to people like myself. Like I was, and you guys made fun of this, in the fact that Olive Garden now, when you go to, and by the way, I still eat Olive Garden because they were making fun of me in our show meeting that I eat Olive Garden probably twice a month. But Olive Garden has a deal now. When you go to Olive Garden, because let's face it, we all fill up on the unlimited breadsticks, the salads, and all that stuff. But they have something on the menu that says, hey, on your way out, if you want to, tell your server that you're willing to give another $5 and we'll pack you up an extra thing of spaghetti or Italian food. I do it because I love leftovers that much that I not only have my leftovers, I have this extra meal that I'm getting for $5.
So I hear all this, and that all just sounds like wonderful financial management. You're spreading out meals, you're having extra food. It sounds, where's the negative? Because it doesn't sound like that's a bad thing to do.
The problem is that leftovers, sometimes life throws you a few curveballs and the leftovers sit in the fridge.
You just kind of hang out for a while.
So I asked Daniel, I said, Daniel, let's do a value. This could be kind of like our public service is we're going to actually share how long you should keep leftovers in your fridge. So this is a public service announcement for your health, your safety. We're going to show you, we pulled together the research, and this is what we found on leftover rules of thumb.
And look, this isn't just us. FTED didn't make this up. This is from foodsafety.gov. If you have fresh chicken or beef, and I think that means raw when it says fresh, I think, it can last for about 1 to 2 days before you probably ought to get it cooked and get it eaten. Pizza, 3 to 4 days. I've not always abided by that one. Sometimes we blow past that one. Salads, 3 to 4 days. That one makes sense to me because salads always get slimy. That one's, you can pretty much tell. And then cooked meats, 3 to 4 days. Now, okay, true or false, Brian, if you look at these categories, have there been times in your life?
Oh, every one of these ought to be doubled or tripled. I mean, look, the government obviously got in conjunction with the people who sell these goods and decided to limit them. I've put a conspiracy on it because if there's nothing growing on some of these things, I'm probably eating it. So but this is a problem, is because I will admit, you want me to be honest, I've been sick.
A couple of times.
Sick from my leftovers, including sometime this year. And I will tell you that it is one of those things, and this falls into a recent show we did. I attribute this desire to spread value, I call it cost to fund ratio, can lead to also where it overlaps with sunk cost fallacy, is that just because you throw leftovers away for your own health and safety doesn't mean you actually cost yourself additional money. It just means you probably ought to throw the leftovers away.
But if you do eat leftovers and you're up, throwing up for a day and you miss work and all these other things, perhaps the cost of finishing off those leftovers just wasn't worth it. So make sure you abide by the Money Guy, aka foodsafety.gov, rules of how long you should let leftovers last.
So let's transition to a serious one, because this is something I also know a little bit about. Let's talk about like tax prep.
Yep.
Because you can be penny wise, pound foolish on who you hire as a professional to help you prepare your taxes. And I think this is interesting because I have 16 years of professional tax preparation experience. I've represented clients before the IRS before and other things. And it always amazes me is there are some distinct personalities of your tax preparers that I want to cover.
And we work with clients all over the country, so we have a pretty wide berth of different types of tax preparers, and they are not all created equal.
So let's go through some of these, we'll call them stereotypes of tax preparers.
Love it.
The first one, you've seen this type in a few commercials, I think, for H&R Block or some of the others. This is the taxes are optional prepare.
Now, see, I'm reminded of a quote by Benjamin Franklin, right? Because I think they're all him. There's only two certainties in life, right? Death and taxes. That's the other one. So I don't know that I would agree with these tax preparers that taxes are optional.
So who was the Hollywood celebrity, the action star that didn't pay taxes and went to jail? It
Wesley Snipes.
Wesley Snipes. So
Blade
Wesley
himself.
Snipes went to the taxes are optional preparer because this is the guy who says everything's deductible. What he doesn't tell you is everything's deductible until you get caught. And so so be very careful. That could be something that you're penny wise, pound foolish on the repercussions that impact you.
And look, that's a cute idea. Everything's deductible till you get caught. Well, I'm sure if they call me out, that'll be okay. True or false? You've actually been in or got a call from a client in an IRS audit who was physically crying in the middle of the audit because it was that intense and that scary and that uncomfortable and that nerve-wracking.
Yeah, here's another little tidbit, because I know a lot of you guys, you know a lot of these things we talk about in the show, so you're always waiting for that little morsel of information that'll serve you well. Here's another little snack, in the fact that if you ever get a true audit, I'm not talking about just a letter from the IRS. I'm talking about where they actually want to meet with you in person. Hire somebody.
Yep. Because
I've had clients that an in-person was requested. They didn't want to pay me with the hourly rate, so they went by themselves. And then that said client called me crying, because here's what happens in an audit. They can mushroom. They can go, because look, if you're the taxpayer sitting down with the IRS, they can say, hey, tell us about this deduction. And if they don't like your answer, actually they say, well, tell me about last year when you took the same deduction. Oh, if you took that deduction for your personal taxes, how about for your business? What did you do? So you see how it all just starts going further and further out with the questioning. Here's how it goes if you have a paid preparer or an attorney that's representing you before the IRS. They ask you, guys, I'm going to have to go ask my client. I just don't know. Question ends. You move on to the next thing. You have to then provide clarifying data to the IRS later, but at least you move on. And that's the reality of what happens in an audit, is that they are going to ask you questions that you need to be prepared to answer. But when you are the tax preparer, they're counting on you to know all answers. So be very careful with that.
So the first type of tax preparer is the too aggressive one, the everything's deductible one. What's the second type?
Well, this is the not my job tax preparer. Now, I
this
deal
was
with
the
these.
most frustrating to me.
Well, I see it all the time. And this is the ones that you see typically, the tax preparers that are in strip shopping centers and others, where whatever you show up to get your taxes done with that today is what's going to show up on your tax return, meaning that there's not a lot of questions. There's not a lot of prying to figure out how can we save more taxes legally, because that's one of the things I think that when I was doing tax preparation, I would not just send out the questionnaire. I'd actually ask the client, get on the phone with them, and say, talk to me about what you got going on financially so I can figure out if there's additional deductions. Because what I was trying to do is figure out how I could pay my fee.
If you can find them some tax savings that covered your fee, it's a win-win and they'll stay a client forever.
But that's not everybody. A lot of you guys, you probably have dealt with tax preparers. This is a transaction. You're going to show up with your shoebox full of documents. Whatever's in that shoebox is what your taxes get prepared with. That's not ideal either.
And look, it's not always the preparer's fault, because the game is kind of set up against them. Tax season it's a short period of time, and they've got to crank through hundreds and hundreds of returns. So a lot of times stuff slips through. Word to the wise right now, if you're not reviewing your tax return sort of line by line, making it make sense, or if you work with a financial advisor and you're not letting them review your tax return, there's a chance that stuff is just putting on because a tax preparer got a 1099-R and just threw the income on there. We see this all the time with Roth conversions. Income shows up on a tax return that should not be there. If you would just spend a little bit of time reviewing it, show them how the flow happened, you can save yourself hundreds or even thousands of dollars in taxes just by going a little bit further, taking the extra step.
That leads you, that's actually a great segue into the third category of tax preparer, which is, what is that? Because the what is that tax preparer is exactly what you just said. It is like we deal with all the time Roth conversion strategies where the CPA, will be like, I've never dealt with this.
There's a 1099R.
I don't know what that
means. It's got to include
it must be taxable. Sometimes, so if you are dealing with transactions, because we've dealt with clients that have, if you have solo 401ks, if you have Roth conversions, there's real estate.
Real estate is a great example.
I mean, these things, if your preparer is not experienced, does not know what they're doing in these certain specific areas, you could get yourself in a lot of issues. So that's why penny wise, pound foolish. Know what you're getting. Don't cut a corner just trying to save a few bucks, because it is sometimes these professionals that you hire. We talked about financial advisors previously. Here it is with tax preparers. Is also think about with attorneys. Just make sure that you're getting good value and you're actually getting the service that's going to cover the needs instead of just saving a few bucks.
Love it.
That leads to, Bo, this was yours. So I feel like you ought to set this up because even though FT Daniel put a construction picture, this is an athletic term.
Yeah, this is an athletic term. This is what I always used to hear. Now, I heard this from high school coaches, and I also heard it from college coaches. Do it right, do it light, do it wrong, do it long. Now, to me, that's just intuitive. But what that means is if you do something right the first time, you only got to do it once. You don't have to do it over and over. If you screw it up, like, if you're kind of lollygagging in the middle of sprints, coach going to make you do it over and over and over until you do it right. So we aptly titled this, Do It Right, Do It Light, Do It Wrong, Do It Long.
Now, this led to, and what we put in here, now, I guess I couldn't find it on YouTube. This is what's so frustrating as you get older is that you'll remember seeing something that's hilarious. And you get older and 5, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years goes away and you can't find the thing. Bernie Mac on his show, if y'all know Bernie Mac had a TV show, and this is the first time I'd heard it, because I know this has been around a long time, but he talks about in home improvements, there's the 2 out of 3 test. And Bo, explain to him what the 2 out of 3 rule is.
Yeah, so the 2 out of 3 tests, you know what, actually, hold on. I want to play a game first, right? Because this is going to set this up really well. Again, if you're out there in iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, fill in the blank, we just went and found some home improvement pictures. Let's see if you can spot what's wrong with these pictures.
I'm embarrassed to say, by the way, before you put them on the screen, the second picture, I had to have Daniel show me what was wrong.
We couldn't find it. I was like, so on the left, there's a guy who, installed some stairs leading upstairs. And there's a bit of an issue. These stairs might not have been constructed thinking about who would be walking up and down these stairs pretty regularly. So if you're not looking at the picture, obviously it's way too close to the ceiling. The guy's running into it. Photo on the right, you may be thinking, is that commode or toilet too close to the bathtub? Or is something wrong with the tile? Or is the floor messed up? No. If you look closely, the toilet paper dispenser is located in the shower.
It's in the shower.
It's in the shower.
Every time, the first time you take a shower, that toilet paper is ruined.
This would not be a good place to put that. And so that leads to Bernie Mac. He had this saying that when it comes to home improvements, when it comes to doing stuff, you get 3 options. Your things can either be fast, it can be done fast, it can be done cheaply, inexpensively, or it can be done well. You get 2 of them, you can't ever find all 3.
I love that cheap, fast, good. You see this applied not only to home improvements, but it is kind of true. I mean, if you want something cheap and good, it's definitely not going to be fast. Somebody's going to be fitting you in. Look, I'll tell you from a tax preparer standpoint, when I was doing that, this is why the family and friends discount sometimes where I was doing taxes for $50 wasn't the greatest thing. Nope. Yes, it was cheap. Yes, I was doing a good job, but you were back of the line. I mean, you were not going to be in front of the line when you're doing it for $50 as the friends and family. It's the same thing. You can do it cheap and fast, but it is not going to be good.
It's probably not going to be good.
That's that previous example where I was talking about the tax preparer that just did your taxes based upon what showed up in the shoebox. And then the last one, of course, is you can have it fast and good, but by goodness, and look, I dealt with when I was on the school board, we had to build some schools fast because we had a timeline that we didn't want kids, caught in this weird pickle. We had to bid it where they actually ran construction sites 24 hours a day.
That does not sound cheap.
You can imagine if you want fast and good, it's not going to be cheap.
Right.
So because you're going to be making some concessions somewhere else. You can apply this to a lot of things in your life. So make sure, do it right, do it light, do it wrong, do it long. That's...
Yeah, we nailed it. And I think a really easy example to think about in the financial world, and we see this all the time, is with attorneys or with legal service, legal professionals.
But walk them through, because it's not uncommon. Matter of fact, I had a phone call with somebody last week that they were like, well, can't I just do my own will? Can't I just go on the internet, do a Google search and just do it? Or is there some problem with that? So I've heard you be on the phone with either prospects or clients, and you've shared that you kind of have a tiered structure that you walk people through.
Truthfully, I call it the estate planning financial order of operations. Right. And when I say I call it that, I just made that up right now. Just thought about it. Reby, let's put that down. But here's the way it works. Essentially, when you are just starting out and things are really simple, you just want to have documented your wishes. So maybe get a piece of paper, write down, hey, if something happens, this is where I want the money to go, and this is this, and this is that, and just sign that and put it somewhere safe, and then let someone know where that is, right? So that's kind of like your first, I call that the back of the napkin estate plan. Well, then maybe you get married or things become a little more complicated, but still not complicated. It's great to use an online service, one of the legal services where you can go on and get like a will or estate document template, and you fill in your information and adjust a few things, print it, make sure it's signed and witnessed and notarized and all the things you're supposed to do. But at some point, it does make sense. Once you graduate to complexity, whether you have children in the picture or you have financial assets that complicate things or you have different stuff in different places, it does make sense to meet with an actual estate attorney that can make sure documents are drafted to match your specific needs and circumstances, not just some boilerplate template.
Well, I think there's even tiers within the attorney world. And
Sure.
the fact that you could go, I mean, if you're a situation where you just have children, you want some healthcare directives, but you're pretty standard on that you own a house, you have a job, you got investments and retirement accounts, they'll have their own beneficiary designations. You're pretty simple. So you can just go to a general attorney. You just the biggest things you're trying to make sure you protect the kiddos, you make sure you have the healthcare directives and maybe a trust set up correctly. But then there's specialists, because there are going to be people, large estates.
Sure.
Or what if you're somebody who has a special needs child?
Absolutely.
I've run into that. Or you have unique family considerations. Maybe you're a blended marriage where you've been married before with kids and your spouse is the same way, and you're kind of combining these two families now. Those are unique situations that you might need to have an attorney that kind of is willing has walked that path before to protect you. So just make sure that you're focusing on doing it right the first time so that you're not screwing this up and having a long-term impact that you weren't counting on.
I love it. All right, let's talk about the last segment. The grouping that we did for this one is pretty straightforward, and I feel it's a beautiful one to end on. And we just said, frankly, life is too short.
Now, this is in the category of, I think as you get older, like I pick on you, 20-year-olds, I pick on you guys, all you guys in your 20s, is because I look back in my own life, is that I could put up a lot in my 20s. I could sleep anywhere.
Sleep on the floor with no pillow.
I could sleep anywhere. I could, cleanliness didn't necessarily bother me as much as it does now. Now I've turned into, I'm in this entrepreneur group and we're going out for like a planning session. First thing I want to know is, do I get my own bed? Do I get my own bathroom? Because I've gotten where I'm just crotchety a little bit.
Bad college Brian would have had.
No, I could have. I literally, it's not just stayed there for a week. If you could see the places I lived and slept in college,
it's very different.
I mean, it was just like, give me a couch and I was good. I don't know what changes in your life, but I've realized this is the category where life is too short. That you don't want to screw it up. And here's the first one, and guys. I grew up in a household, and y'all go, after I talked about it in a previous show, like last week's show was like the doo-doo dollar, and I told that whole story. Y'all are going to be like, what's going on with Brian? But this is something I didn't realize until I was out on my own in college that this word ply had any meaning whatsoever, because the house I grew up with in my childhood, my parents bought the cheapest toilet paper you could. And what I think is interesting is that in the year 2020, this has been the year of TP.
Oh, no, literally the year of toilet
paper. This year is so screwed up that we have made toilet paper one of the most valuable resources on the planet. Forget gold, forget Bitcoin. Get out there and get you some TP. Because it is one of those things where I think our relationship with TP has been changed forever. But it is one of those things when I look back at my own childhood, this is what I want to know now. Because I grew up where cheap toilet paper. Yeah. And then I get on my own, I'm in college, and I'm like,
well, there's
Charmin.
Whoa,
this costs
there's
$4 or $5. This is
stuff.
$1.50, but I'm understanding life's too short. Just because I can save $2.50 on this pack of toilet paper, probably should spend more. Now, what I want to know, I have some anger in my heart that I'm scared to ask my mom because I don't want to know the answer. I want to know, were they just giving us kiddos the sandpaper and then they had luxurious stuff in their bathrooms? or if this was just
Or
they
the
were
whole family
Spartans.
was doing
We're just
it.
the family of Spartans when it came to this.
Yeah,
thing.
man. I was just saying, it wasn't until college that I realized there was such a thing as nice toilet paper. And I remember the first time I went to the grocery store, I bought like just the stuff that I'd recognized from home. And then I like somebody else, one of my roommates or something who grew up in a much nicer part of town, but had like the good stuff.
So you started using their stuff.
Of course I started using their stuff.
That's the Bo way right there.
It's the Bo Mooch way. Of course I started using their stuff.
So let's turn this into something that's actually serious, which is I always think about in the fact that life is too short. Because I mean, and I don't want to. Because, by the way, we have done this where we ended on something that is a super serious topic, Bo, and that is not typically the way we end the Money Guy show, but it is something that I think is important.
I'll think of a good joke to close out to make everyone laugh.
But life is so short. It was nobody's promised any additional days, is that I did think it's one of those things that I want people to think about insurance. I mean, in a lot of ways, we are trying to figure out how we can save money. One of the places you do not want to cut the edge off of is insurance. And I'm talking about life insurance, disability insurance, even the way you look at the way you're structuring your health insurance. Pay attention to the risk versus what the financial difficulty. Remember that whole opportunity cost analysis I was talking about. What's the good stuff that happens if you make this decision? What's the bad? And I think it could give you some clarity. Look, we all get it. Life insurance is kind of a morbid, scary subject. But the good news is that a lot of us, I would say the majority of the population, a good term policy, not whole life, but a good like 20-year term policy will serve your needs. So you could, if you're trying to figure out where the value is, like a 30-year-old can get one, this is a woman, can get $1 million 20-year term for about $299.
That's $299 for the whole year.
For the year.
Not per month, for the whole year. $299 for $1 million.
A man, because we know that, this is one of those situations because the ladies outlive the guys.
Sure.
$373 for the same 30-year-old, 40-year-old, because you're probably definitely in the kid territory at that 40 years of age. $1 million for the ladies is $501 a year, and for a 40-year-old man, it's $593. Guys, life is too short that if you weigh the opportunity cost, if something happens to me today, the good, I guess, if you're looking at the decision between life insurance or not, is that I saved that $593 of insurance premium. The bad is my family is stuck with unfunded things like college, debt, and just making sure that they have the money to provide things. I think you quickly can see, man, I really wish I'd have paid $593 for this term life insurance to make sure my family's protected. It gives you the clarity not to make one of those foolhardy decisions that actually hurt your long-term financial success.
And frankly, even if you extrapolate, okay, that $100 over the course of 20 years, what if I pay it for 20 years and I don't end up getting the life insurance payout? That's pretty good news. You made it for 20 plus years. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The other thing you want to make sure of is when it comes to like property and casualty insurance, you may not want to choose the cheapest the cheapest insurance company out there that you've never heard of that has some poor rating, because ultimately, when you buy insurance, what you're counting on is that company will be able to satisfy the claims when you have them, whether it's homeowners or auto owners or disability or long-term care. So make sure you're not just going with the cheapest solution. You want to make sure you have a company that's actually going to show up and be there when you need them the most.
And I think there's some positive steps you can do.
Sure.
Like if you just mentioned property and casualty. Don't just go with the cheapest carrier, but you can find savings by maybe pushing up your deductibles.
Yep.
That's the way you actually do it right. Same thing, life insurance. Pay attention, because I like term life insurance. If you're trying to figure out, you're like, okay, this is going to be the day I'm going to actually go make sure my family's protected. Go multiply your income times 10. You've heard that, but I would tell you on top of that, add, what are your outstanding debts? So, because if you have a mortgage, a big mortgage, or some other debts that are hanging out there, stack that on top of the 10 times income, and then maybe even consider adding on some of those unfunded goals like college and so forth. Because you'll find that you can buy enough protection to make sure your family's on stable ground going forward.
Look, there's nothing wrong with being frugal, and there's nothing wrong with saving money, and there's nothing wrong with building your army of dollar bills early on. But it's okay to spend money on some things, and dare we say, sometimes it's appropriate to spend money on certain things to make sure that you're covering the bases, to make sure that the quality of life that you're living is actually worth doing it. Because we hear stories all the time about the person who, they never indulged, they always saved, they did everything, and they get to retirement, and then the next day they get hit by the bus,
right?
Or they get the medical condition comes down. There's a balance. If you're following the financial order of operations, if you're doing the things you're supposed to be doing, it's okay to be able to enjoy the present right now. You just have to understand what are those things that you place value on where it's worth spending money, and what are the things you don't care about that you can get rid of.
Well, I think you just said some key things, and this is a great closing. Value. Know the value of what's important to you. Know what your why is on things. Know where it fits into your plan. Yep. I mean, that you mentioned financial order of operations. Right. If you go into life, your financial life, without a plan, all you've done is set yourself up for failure because you're just out there flopping around. Think about you're a ship without a rudder in the back that's guiding you. You cannot do those type of things. And then it's that last part. Look, I know a lot of coping mechanisms assume, hey, because I see this in the comment section. People say, I'm not guaranteed tomorrow. I'm going to spend like today is my last day. I've listened to Tim McGraw and I'm going to go do it. No, I'm telling you guys, statistically, the lion's share of you who are watching this, who are hearing it, you're going to live to be a ripe old age. Sure. Start acting like it.
Yep.
Because there's a whole population that they get there and they go, uh-oh. What do I do? And then I'll tell you what you do. You move in the basement of your kiddos. And that's not what plan A should be. That should be just kind of for the people who didn't take the steps. So that's what, use the information we share on the Money Guy, get motivated, and go out there and start creating abundance in your life.
If you've not gone out to our website yet, go out to moneyguy.com/resources. Go check out all the stuff that we have. If you've not been spending time on our website, moneyguy.com, giving us your email, maybe you haven't noticed some really, really exciting things, some huge things that are going on in the Money Guy world. So go to our website, check that out. Make sure you subscribe. Right now, we are closing in on 77,000 subscribers on YouTube. We want to get to 100,000, and we can't do that without you. If you're renting your seat, do two favors for us. Right now, click subscribe, and then smash the like button so the YouTube algorithm will give us some loving.
Somebody's been watching YouTube.
I know. I heard somebody else say that. I heard him say something. I totally stole that. I stole that.
Guys, thanks so much. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen. Money Guy team out.
I thought that was pretty good. Awesome. You can give away some tumblers?
Yeah, we can give away some tumblers.
He was like, I don't know, do I? Is that what we do? Is that what we do right now?
I just wait for you guys to tell me. It works on the weekends where I come home. Everybody, like, I'll go do something. Somebody say, "What are you doing this weekend?" I'm like, I don't know. Whatever my wife tells me we're doing, because she's kind of like the event coordinator for the weekend. I'm slowly letting you guys kind of seep into my daily calendar that way too.
You want to do a promotional question?
Okay.
Okay. This is from Mike Risch on YouTube. He says, hey, on last week's podcast, both Brian and Bo mentioned they had a Fidelity Visa. That's true. I was just curious where they allocate their 2% cash back. 529, brokerage, IRA, etc. I'm looking at getting this card. Here's how I want you to answer this question. Yeah, it's true. We both use the Fidelity Visa card. How should we think about the credit cards that we choose and the credit cards that we use? And then you can share how you use the cash, and I'll share how I use the cash.
Well, I think there's multiple things in that question. First is I use my Fidelity Visa. It goes straight into my brokerage account.
I do the same.
The reason I do it is if I put it in my 529, first of all, every state might have a state tax benefit. You need to pay attention to your state's 529, look at the rankings, look at how they're structured and the benefits. And for me, it made sense to, because I was living in Georgia when my children were born, and there was definitely a great state tax deduction. So I didn't want it to go into the Fidelity 529. I wanted to go have more control over that. Also, it was another thing is a lot of people, because I do like cashback cards, because they give you maximum flexibility on how you use it. Whereas I know there's a lot of credit card gamers that use a lot of these travel cards. I don't use those. I think COVID has shown that cash is king on flexibility and usage because I can still go buy airline tickets with my cash. I can still use them to book hotels. So I think cash definitely dominates in that aspect. Some honorable mentions: the Amazon Prime card. If you have a lot of smile boxes coming.
Are you getting the 4% right now? Did you do that? I know this is not timely. I'm going to go on a little side here. I got the email where they said, hey, if you sign up from now to February, 4% on all restaurants and 4% on all travel.
Well,
and all gas stations.
How is it not shocking that Amazon's trying to dominate another category? It really is another category for Jeff Bezos to have world domination.
Because I was using my 3% card for the restaurant. Now I'm using 4%. It's like I'm making free money from now till February.
So that's a good card to get. By the way, these are just benchmarks of things we've noticed. I'm not giving because we don't participate in all that cash, affiliation fees and all that stuff. So, and then the other one, I have a Costco card because I do like my Costco savings.
That's my 3%
on gas and all that stuff. But that's how I use my credit cards.
I think that's great. I had a client the other day who said, hey, I've got 15 different credit cards. I don't use half of them. Should I close them down? I said, yeah, go close down every credit card except for the oldest one because that's the one you want to leave out there. And, I think I have like a 4, I've got the Target card because we do Target a lot. Got the Amazon card, I got the Costco card, I got the Fidelity card. I got 4. It's pretty easy to manage, pretty easy to set up, and I let all my cash back just flow into my brokerage account.
Yeah, I would say measure twice on that closing of credit cards, though, because you do need to be careful. They could have a short-term detrimental impact to your credit score. Mm-hmm. And I always say be careful of having too many lines of credit, just because you don't want to have something slip through the cracks. Because you're going to find, guys, when you get older, as you become more successful, complexity naturally happens to you just because as you build success, your life gets complicated. Don't create complexity when it's unnecessary. Now, when I can tell you, just seeing behind the curtain, my wife, I guess Nordstrom just had their annual sale.
Oh, yeah, whatever. My wife's been talking about it.
My wife doesn't have a store credit card, so she doesn't get to go to the early access points, and she tells me how it's costing us a fortune.
My wife has that card.
I'm still staying. You have that card?
I've got the Nordstrom card.
That probably means it's going to push my needle over the other
5.
way. So it's just funny how you be careful of store credit cards. I'll probably end up losing that battle at some point, but it is something. Be mindful. Keep your financial life as simple. So because complexity is going to happen naturally.
Now, here's what my wife told me, because now that we have the Nordstrom card, we're practically making money, right? She shares with me all these deals with the sale. It's basically like we're making money.
I'm probably going to get in trouble. Fortunately, my wife doesn't watch the show, so hopefully she doesn't figure out that your wife has that card.
All right, that was a great. Hey, Mike, if you like a Tumblr, you can write Rebecca, REBECCA @moneyguy.com. This next one's from Douglas. This is a YouTube listener too. He said, question, can I roll over my 457 the same way that you can roll over a 401k?
You do have abilities to roll 457s, but the question is, should you?
There we go.
Well, no, because look, 457s are so unique in the fact that they don't. We all know that one of the big things you have to pay attention to with 401ks and 403bs is that while they're in plan, meaning that while they're at the 401k, while they're at the 403b provider, once you've separated service and say you get access to those plan assets at 55 versus the 59 and a half for the avoiding the underpayment penalties or early withdrawal penalties. That's what, not underpayment, early withdrawal penalties. 457s don't have those early withdrawal penalties. Right. So a lot of people, that's why you'll notice a lot of your firefighters, your police, their government type entities where you do have a lot of people retiring, military, where they're retiring when they're 50, 51. These 457s are great assets because they can start pulling that money out at 50 years of age and not have an early withdrawal penalty. So just measure twice on taking those 457 assets because they do have some unique access benefits that other 401ks don't allow.
And keep in mind, if you do have access to a 457 and you also have access to a 401k, 403b, salary deferral limits don't aggregate. So if you're under 50, you can put 19.5 into your 401k, 403b, and another 19.5 into your 457. It's the only type of plans like that. Like 401k, 403b, they aggregate. The others aggregate. 457 is unique. It's not under the same code section. So it's a great hyper accumulation strategy for folks who have access to both.
Yeah, so you see a lot of doctors that work at hospitals
Yep.
and other things that actually can maximize both. You can
Love
load
it.
up a 457 and a 401k.
Douglas, that was a great question. If you would like a tumbler, you can write Rebecca, Rebecca, at moneyguy.com. Here's one. I think you know the answer to this.
Oh, gosh.
I think I know the answer.
Good. You can be my backstop.
I hope we know the answer. This is from Will. He's a financial question. Awesome. This is a financial show. It's a good place to ask one of those. What does a church have to do to allow members to contribute using QCDs, qualified charitable distributions? Well, first, I think it'd be helpful to hear, what is a qualified charitable distribution?
Well, a qualified charitable distribution, this is a great planning technique for clients because we all know one of the things you're going to find, we talk about tax location a lot on our show, is that because there is a tendency for my hyper savers out there, you're going to have a lot of tax deferred accounts. You're going to have big 401ks, big 403bs, big IRAs that are going to build up. The problem is, and this just got updated, was that you have a required minimum distribution at age 72. So the government makes you start pulling money out based upon your life expectancy so they can collect income taxes on that money. So what QCD, qualified charitable distributions, allows you to do is you can actually take a portion, you can distribute directly from your retirement accounts to the qualified charity, meaning you actually fill out the distribution paperwork, but have the money go directly to the charity instead of to you. So that's a big setup, is just make sure your church knows, hey, you got a distribution check coming to you. Sometimes the paperwork from your custodian that provides that holds your IRAs will be a little weird. So it is going to require you to have better record keeping, because your distribution might, your 1099-R at the end of the year might have that number in there. So you need to make sure that you can separate that out. But a lot of you guys, because here's the thing, you're going to say, well, wait a minute. If this shows up, why would I do this? Because if it went directly to them, and because it doesn't show up as like on a Schedule A as a charitable distribution, but what it does do is you don't actually pay the income. You don't have to recognize. Remember, if the government is making you pull this money out of your retirement account, but you have a portion go to your charity, you're not going to pay income tax on that portion that went to the charity. And you're probably like, well, but why is that a big deal? Here's why this is a huge deal. Also realize since you're over 65, you're going to have probably Social Security coming in. You're going to have Medicare that you're on for your health insurance, because you won't have that income in your camp because it went directly to the church. Your taxability on your Social Security could go down.
That's right.
The premiums you pay on your Medicare could be impacted and make them go lower.
Yep.
There's some really good side benefits, and it lets you check the box on your charitable desires.
To answer your question about what does the church need to do, to my knowledge, nothing, because what happens is they actually just get a check. Just like any other check, all your church has to do is be willing to accept a check from a financial institution. So that's pretty low maintenance there in order for them to be able to receive that.
You, as the individual, though, do need to check some boxes.
You need to check the boxes.
Because like I said, that 1099-R could come out at the end of the year. The QCD might not be highlighted, so you need to make sure you're telling your tax preparer how this deal was structured so that it doesn't happen. It doesn't get screwed up. I see. You're throwing me off there with this whole moving forward and backwards.
That was a great question. If you would like a tumbler, you can write Rebecca, Rebecca, at moneyguy.com. All right, one more question. I'm going to answer this one quickly, and then you just fill in the blanks of what I miss. Deal?
Okay.
All right, this is from Grayson on YouTube. Financial question. Love it. I love that you guys are letting us know that they're financial questions. How do you determine if a Roth conversion strategy is worth it? If so, how much does it cost? Very simply, there are two types of Roth conversion strategies. The kind that you don't pay any tax on, and the kind that you do pay any tax on. So I'd make the argument, if you're someone who can do a Roth conversion and not trigger any taxes, like you're doing an after-tax contribution to an IRA and you're not taking the deduction and you convert that and it's not taxable, it's pretty standard. If you have the ability to do that, you should do that. We walk through that in the financial order of operations. The other is, if I want to convert pre-tax assets to Roth, I just need to go look at what my tax rate is. And do I think that it's going to be more advantageous to pay the tax now, convert those dollars to Roth, let them grow tax-free, or is it better to let them grow tax-deferred and pay tax when I pull them out? You have to make an estimation on where your tax rate is now and where you anticipate it will be when you pull those dollars out, whether that be in retirement or after age 72 due to RMDs. We like Roth conversions in lower tax brackets. That's where it generally makes a lot of sense, but it's very customized, very individualized.
Where we see this, there's two, because I want to give real world practicality to what you just said, is that the ones because that first scenario is kind of what they call a backdoor contribution.
Sure.
That's I don't like that terminology because it's really a Roth conversion strategy. If you don't have separate IRA assets like SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, rollover IRAs, where you have to prorate the basis, but you don't have any of that, you can, even if you make over the funding income limits for IRAs, you can make a traditional non-deductible IRA contribution, exactly what Bo said, and then convert that into a Roth. But for the other, when you are going to pay taxes, where we really see this happen all the time and a great planning opportunity, if you retire somewhat early, let's say you somebody who retires, it used to say really early before 70 and a half, now it's 72.
Sure.
Your income, like if you retire at 60, your income, if you're in a high income situation and then you retire and now you're living off the portfolio, you might find that your income tax situation has gone way down.
Yep.
And if it has, go pay attention to exactly what Bo shared. Where are the next marginal step up rate is? And maybe you should maximize that area. Now, as you get into later years where you have Social Security income coming in or you're taking Medicare once you're over 65, pay attention to where your income on those thresholds. There's a lot of moving parts there. That's why I think this is a great planning strategy. If you have a financial advisor to kind of walk through some of those unintended consequences, but definitely something you ought to be checking the box on because why not? We talked about tax location because how great is it if you get to legally manipulate your income taxes in retirement by having after tax, meaning like a brokerage account, having tax deferred like your traditional 401ks, your rollover IRAs, your 403bs, and then tax free, which are your Roth accounts. If you have all three of those, you can kind of move things around and use those assets in a very tax efficient way.
Love it. Grayson, great question. If you'd like a tumbler, you can write Rebecca, REBECCA at moneyguide.com. Guys, as always, thank you so much for letting us do this show with you. Quick question. Have you hit the like button? If not, do that now. Make sure you subscribe. We love you. We're going to keep the content.
Smash that like button. Isn't that what you said?
I thought I could only say it once in this show. Thank you. We're going to be here for you. Now, if you want to check out the websites, go to aboundwealth.com, go to moneyguide.com. We have contact us forms there. Let us know what you think. Let us know how we can be a resource. And we're going to keep dishing out the content for you.
And give us your email address. Go to moneyguide.com, put your email address in so you can know about some of the big news that's coming because we're starting to do some drip campaigns. You guys are probably starting to get the emails. We're excited. More to come. Money Guy team out.